And our final speaker for tonight is Christopher McAuley, an associate professor in the Department of Black Studies at UCSB. He teaches Caribbean Studies and has written on Oliver C. Cox, the Caribbean and World Systems Theory.
You can't clap before I say anything. It might be terrible. In a certain way, I feel like I'm going to be the... Can you hear me? I feel like I'm going to be the bearer of bad news because I want to start by saying I don't think of the prospects for any sort of... No, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. That should Is this a...
That's the bearer of bad news.
Wow. All right, let's try this again. But I feel like I'm going to be the bearer of bad news because essentially one of the things that I want to say is that I don't think that the left in the English-speaking Caribbean has gotten over what happened in the Grenadian Revolution, about which I'll say something in a minute. So I'm not sure what serious prospects there are for radical social change in the English-speaking Caribbean because I still think that the taste of what happened to Grenada is still kind of in the mouths of a lot of leftist intellectuals and activists in the English-speaking Caribbean. Are people familiar at all with the Grenadian Revolution? Some people are. Very short-lived revolution that took place in March of 1979. And some of you may remember that it kind of officially came to an end on October 25th, 1983, when it is that the United States had actually invaded the island. Right? Now, if you remember, our President Reagan at the time had said that he invaded in order to save the medical students, because there is a medical school, which is now St. George's University, in Grenada, and he claimed that he was there to save the medical students. Of course, the dean of the university, of the medical school, told him that there was absolutely no reason for you to actually intervene. Everybody's fine. And in fact, when it is that he was actually pressured to ask the State Department to intervene, he actually refused on more than one occasion. But anyway, those are roughly the years of the revolution. And if you know, the two main, I guess, protagonists of the revolution were Bernard Ford and Morris Bishop. I'll say something briefly about both of them because essentially what happened between them played a significant role in the demise of the revolution. And it was essentially the internal struggles that took place in the revolution that the United States had used, the Reagan administration had used as a justification to intervene. Morris Bishop, in many ways, I've seen a number of people who compared him to a Fidel. All right, he was the type of person. If you knew Morris, and I speak with some authority here, I never got that close to him, but he's kind of part of my extended family. My father's from Grenada, so many of the people who I'm talking about, I'm some way connected to because Grenada, I should have said, is a country that can fit on Manhattan Island. And we've got a population of about 100,000 people. So when you talk about a revolution being a family affair, it's very much a family affair. I mean, I had, just as an aside, sometimes dinner conversations when I was in the country during the revolution and afterward were just fascinating. Because on one side of the table, right, you would have somebody who was in the government, right? I remember a cousin of mine was actually the one who smuggled arms from the United States into Grenada, right, in order to actually overthrow the Geary regime. I'll say something about him. And on the other side of the family, you had people who were staunchly against the revolution, but here we all were actually breaking bread together. So you can imagine the tension and the great conversations that actually went on. But Bishop was very much this Fidel type, very charismatic person, loved to mingle with the people, could be very comfortable with virtually anyone. Right? He took a law degree at the University of London. Conversely, Bernard Ford did his undergraduate work at Brandeis, did his degree in economics in Sussex in England. Very careful thinker, very disciplined thinker, good speaker, didn't have necessarily any warmth with people. Wasn't anybody you could kind of get warm and fuzzy with, that type of thing. But very precise, very meticulous thinker. I guess that's why he was an economist. And also one who, and I'll say something about this a little bit more, one who had very set notions of how it is that a revolution of the type that they were waging, what type of revolution it should be, and what kind of paths it should follow. Whereas with Bishop, you had somebody who was far more flexible. Right? Grenada, if you know anything about not only the Grenada, but I would just say the Caribbean, it has a history of being, although it's very small, it's had a past as a major sugar producer. But more recently, it's been a big cocoa producer, a banana producer. And it's also known as the Spice Isle. Nutmeg, cinnamon, mace, a couple of other things that are produced there. And so those are kind of the big ways that it gets foreign currency. And of course, the other big thing is tourism. I didn't bring any pictures of Grenada, but I say this as a Grenadian of sorts, that it's an absolutely gorgeous place. And I'll say something more about the tourist industry, because I do feel that what's happened as a result of the invasion and what that's done to the tourist industry, as well as to a couple of other industries, I think might be the catalyst, particularly in this economic downturn, might be the catalyst for kind of a radicalizing of things of sorts. The largely agricultural population, as of course most of the Caribbean is, struggling of course to make money off of the sorts of things that it exports. And as a result, you're dealing with a lot of poverty, as you are in many places in the Caribbean. Some of the pictures, perhaps that Judge just showed us in Haiti, perhaps not. You wouldn't find necessarily the same level of material deprivation, but it would come close in many of the areas in the countryside. And so, certainly one of the things that the revolution was trying to respond to was the needs of a lot of people in the countryside, for everything from better, loans, access to credit, electricity, plumbing. So basic infrastructural issues were things that the revolution had to respond to, as well as healthcare, as well as providing education. So in that sense, and very clearly the Grenadian Revolution was, in certain ways, modeled on the Cuban Revolution. Not solely. I mean, there were other sources that it took, or other sources of inspiration. Walter Rodney, other people who were in the Caribbean at the time, or particularly in the 1960s, who inspired things. And especially also the Black Power movement and the sort of consciousness that raising that did to a number of Caribbean people who actually had the opportunity to go to England or go to the United States. So the number of sources that actually inspired the revolution to become what it became, and also to achieve what it achieved. On the political front, and this is really the other reason why the revolution was necessary, because rarely is it simply material deprivation or poverty that's going to create a revolutionary situation. It typically has to be combined with political dead ends, if you will, for lack of a better term. In this case, this was the person who created this was the I can't call him, he was the person that would actually lead, of sorts, Grenada to independence. Grenada achieved its independence in 1974 from England. But pretty much from the 1950s to 1974, the person who, although it was still a British colony, the person who really ran things in Grenada was a man by the name of Geary. A labor leader, very populist labor leader during the 1950s, who, over the course of time, amassing a lot of political power, a lot of followers, and so forth,